QSO Today, episode 360, Chip Angle N6CA. This episode of QSO Today is sponsored by ICOM America, makers of the finest HF, VHF, and UHF transceivers and accessories for the radio amateur, reminding you that ICOM now has some unique and effective communication solutions for MCOM. My thanks to ICOM America for their continued support of the QSO Today podcast. The QSO Today Virtual Ham Expo is coming again on August 14th and 15th. We have a lineup of now over 90 amazing presentations, interesting exhibitors, and prizes. Entry to the exhibit hall is free, and full convention passes that include a 30-day on-demand period are available for only $10. We are back on the VFairs platform that we used last August, and we guarantee a smooth and flawless experience. In fact, we will be offering a test run of the expo on August 1st, 2nd, and 3rd. Please stay tuned. See you at the expo. Welcome to the QSO Today podcast. I'm Eric Guthfor, Z1UG, your host. Chip Angle N6CA harnessed an early interest in the band's VHF to microwave as a passion that continues to this day. While he is active on every band, he pays special attention to low-noise receiver performance on his radios that work well above 10 gigahertz. This attention to detail and training from the aerospace industry allowed Chip to start his own company, building low-noise preamps, filters, and duplexers, and other hardware ultimately used by government, including NASA and the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. N6CA shares his ham radio story in this QSO Today. N6CA, this is Eric for Z1UG. Are you there, Chip?
Yes, I am. Good morning.
Good morning, Chip. Thanks for joining me on the QSO Today podcast. Can we start at the beginning of your ham radio story? When and how did it start for you?
Well, a long time ago, a very long time ago, I had a friend who, in the Boy Scouts, and they had a meeting over at his house. His older brother, K6UQW, was a general class licensee, and he had a radio hiding in his closet. And I sneaked back there and visited him, and I was hooked. And started really getting into it, and got a hold of an old receiver and started listening, started learning the code, and it was quite exciting for me in the early days. I mean, I really got into it big time. My folks gave me my first book, the ARL Handbook, 1957 edition, and I was thoroughly inundated by the complexity of it because I really didn't have any background at that moment. So, but we started plugging away at it, and eventually I had Bruce was his name, K6UQW, gave me my novice exam. At the time, you had to do 5 words a minute code and pass a written exam, and then he graded it, and I was off and running.
What was the hometown?
I was living in Santa Monica at the time, about 20 miles north of where I am now. We've always been in this area.
So Santa Monica, California is like due west of Los Angeles.
Yeah, about 25, 30 miles straight west of downtown L.A. on the beach.
Okay, well, that's a great place to grow up. The year that you got your novice license was?
1959, summer.
And the call sign?
Whiskey Victor 6, Germany, Uniform Yankee.
How did it go from there? What was the first novice rig?
I had a loaner radio, and I didn't know how to use it. And the guy finally wanted it back. The transmitter was a homebrew, and it was very strange. I didn't have the knowledge to really get it working correctly. And then I mowed lawns for the summer and earned $15 to buy my first receiver, a BC 348. I still have one today, not the same one, but I have another one, which I really like. It was a great radio. And then my folks gave me a Viking Adventurer used, which put out 28 watts, and I used that for quite a while. And I put up a folded dipole antenna. My dad helped me with it, and fell in love with 40-meter CW. Just had a blast on there.
Now, 40 meters kind of opens up at night. Was that when you operated, or were you one of these kids that would operate in the morning before school and after school?
Well, I didn't know much about DXing. I really needed a mentor, which I didn't have. And that brings up the point that everybody should get somebody to help them stumble through the learning curve. And but we did pretty much when I wasn't in school. I was on the air talking to anybody and everybody looking for DX. It was fun. I was very limited because of the power, and lot of afternoon stuff after school, trying to get into Europe. Never made Europe, but we did a lot of Pacific and Asia in the evening.
Now, there were a lot of kids getting into ham radio in Southern California, I think, in those days. Did you end up finding a group of friends, either on the air or in the local area, that you...
I actually met a guy who moved down here from Washington. We went and got our general licenses together. And we used to talk quite a bit on 40-meter CW. And I don't know what happened to him. He disappeared. But we used to do a lot of stuff together, and I think we kind of helped each other. We learned a lot together and shared amateur radio. We met a few other of the hams in the town. Some of them are still around. And so it was a slow growth thing. I probably should have joined a club to get a better head start at the hobby, but we had a lot of fun.
Was Palisades Amateur Radio Club around in those days?
Yes, it was. I actually... I don't remember the year, but I remember visiting one of their meetings. Somebody took me to it. I don't recall who. And they had this amazing thing. It was a 1-watt, 80-meter transistor. The first one anybody had ever heard of that put out that much power. It was amazing.
And did you build something with it?
No, but very early on I got into building. Even before amateur radio, I was building crystal sets. And I learned that I'm very fussy and fastidious about the things I make. I'm still that way today. In fact, my grandson seems to have inherited that trait. Perfectionist, I think, is a good word to put it, a good way to sum it up. But I used to build crystal sets. I got into a transistorized radio. And early on, I was really crazy about building. Before radios, I was into building model boats and making things with my hands. And I'm still that way to this day. I love building things all the time, every day, almost.
I think in those days, the novice license lasted, only a year, and you had to either upgrade or lose it, right?
Yes, that's correct.
And did you upgrade?
Oh, yeah. Before the end of it, my buddy John, WA6 Lima Mike Oscar, and I went down to, seemed like 1,000 miles away, downtown Los Angeles on the bus and took our general class licenses, and we both passed, and opened up a whole new world.
Now, you make a comment on your QRZ page that Gladys Kravitz, who worked in the FCC LA office in 1960, didn't seem to want you to pass the general exam. Why did you think that was?
Yeah, the way she stared at us, it was actually kind of funny. I can still see her looking at us. You know, you're sitting there. I hadn't been very far away from home up until that point. Cold, hard wooden desk, away from home. Cold granite floors and walls, and this lady who kind of scowled at you. I mean, it was kind of a very unfriendly environment to be pushed into and taking a code test. So we were obviously very nervous, and it was obviously an exaggeration, but that's how I think of her.
Well, I think it's so funny that you remember her name.
That wasn't her name. I made it up.
Okay.
There was in a television program.
Right. No, I was thinking Gladys Kravitz sounded like one of the I Love Lucy show or something like that.
It was actually Bewitched. It was their nagging neighbor.
So where did you go from there? Did you stay on 40 meters as a new general, or did you branch out from there?
Bruce, K6UQW, gave me some early magazines, CQ magazines and QST magazines, and I read those before I got my license. And I started looking at things, and I got interested in the world above 50 megahertz column. I've always been interested in that. For some reason or other, it really got my interest, especially 1296. So I got to reading about it, and I don't remember how I got into it. I got a hold of somebody who was on 1296, probably a couple of years after I got my general, and I went down to J.J. Glass in downtown L.A. and bought an APX6. Got the book on how to modify it, and somewhere or another I dug up notes and all that, and I actually got it working and worked a couple of people. I was really interested in the microwave stuff, just drawn to it big time. I love the challenge. I love the building, and kind of the unknown of the microwaves drew me very intensely.
Did ham radio then, and this interest in microwaves, did it have any bearing on what you decided to do in terms of your further education and career?
Oh, absolutely. It set me up for a lifetime career that I've been very happy with. Once I got out of high school, I went in the Navy, got into being an electronics technician. I took a year of school at Treasure Island in San Francisco and got into being a radar class electronics technician. I spent 3 years after that aboard a destroyer in the Pacific working on radars, 1200 meg radars, 8 gigahertz, and maintaining, keeping them running, and electronic countermeasures equipment, and all pretty much microwave related, and enjoyed the heck out of it. Had a lot of fun. That was the start.
And then did you do a higher education after that, or did you just, from the Navy, you just went into the working world?
I had about 2.5 years of engineering college, and then I got married and started raising a family and got extremely busy work-wise, and never really got back into school.
So what did you do for work once you got married and started raising the family? And I assume that you stayed in Southern California?
Yeah, I stayed in Southern California. I worked for a Hughes Aircraft Company after I got out of what I call the canoe club, the Navy, and got into forward-looking infrared electro-optic group. I spent about 12 years roughly there. Learned a lot about FLIRs. That was a fun job, and slowly worked my way up level-wise. Did an awful lot of building. I love building. I've been doing it my whole life, and I think I'm relatively good at it. I'm pretty fast, but we do a lot of building, and there's the two main aspects of amateur radio I really like are building things and CW. It's a hoot.
CW operation is one of your favorite modes?
Oh, absolutely. It's the digital modes are wonderful. Like I do a lot of FT8 on 6-meter DXing, but that's the only place I do it. I really don't do it on the low bands. CW on low bands is a lot of fun. DXing and things like that, I enjoy that. I listen to CW just because it's very relaxing. The FT8 digital modes on 6 meters allows me to work things I could never work in regular modes. It's kind of taken over amateur radio, but I'm up to 153 countries of work in Southern California on 6 meters. So it's the highest the second highest in the state at the moment. And we've been doing it for quite a few years. I go all out for 6 meters. I run a big Yagi up at 80 feet and a kilowatt when I need it. So it's kind of fun. I love CW, and FT8 allows me to work stuff I could never hear.
So you'll run a kilowatt on FT8?
Oh, absolutely. To work long. One of my goals on 6-meter DXing is to work Israel.
I think you have to wake up the folks here in Israel in order to get them on 6 meters FT8.
Well, there's a couple of them on. I've made it all the way to Sugar Victor 9 out in Crete. Last year we had about a 4-hour opening to Eastern Europe, Bulgaria, Poland, and Hungary. It was incredibly exciting. One of these days I'll make it to Israel. I mean, I enjoy working Israel on any band. Like even 40 meters is a hoot. So 6 meters would be kind of like the ultimate.
Well, I understand that we've got a number of new beacons going up around the coastal area around Tel Aviv. Hopefully, you'll be able to hear those beacons. You'll know when we're open.
You never know.
We just have to get some people on the air. We're kind of a smaller community here, so you might have to make a sked in order to work us.
Yeah, it's 6-meter DXing. You got to literally have to have your hand on the key. You can't miss it. I mean, we used to joke about F2 propagation modes to Africa, and they go, you can work Africa on 6 meters? And you say, yeah. It opens for maybe 40 minutes every 12 years. Don't miss it.
How do you predict when you might have an opening? Are there some pretty scientific tools for that?
Yes, there is. During the summer, the face of amateur radio has changed major. FT8 has brought a lot of people back into it because they can use their computers. They can also work the world with a wire antenna hanging out the window with 100 watts, excuse me, without having to have a big antenna and a kilowatt. So they can enjoy DXing and rag shoe, not really rag shoeing, but some of the modes you can rag shoe. But just to work DX, you don't need a lot of stuff to do it. To run long haul 6-meter DXing, absolutely you run a kilowatt and a big Yagi, the higher the better. I run a 41-foot, 8-element homebrew Yagi at 81 feet with extremely low loss feed line and a kilowatt when needed. And I get out very well, pretty much heard all over the world at places. But you got to be ready, and everything has to work perfectly in order to be able to do it. It's when the band's open loud, anybody can work it. But when you're working stuff that's, buried in the noise or 1 or 2 dB out of the noise on CW, every dB counts. Getting rid of noise, getting antenna gain, operating skill. The whole bit. It takes a while to learn all of it. And it's been fun learning.
Do you use paddles?
Yeah, I use paddle. What's interesting is on 10 gigahertz, we run a lot of CW, but I use a hand key. Nobody's in a big hurry down there. And when you're running portable microwave, you can't hear your side tone with trucks going by. So you run a hand key so you can keep sending without having to hear yourself.
And now this message from ICOM America. You may know that ICOM America has been supplying radios to North American market for almost 50 years. You may not know that ICOM makes communication solutions for aviation, land mobile, and marine as well. As hurricane season kicks off in June and wildfire season is upon the West, ICOM has advanced emergency communication systems for emergency organizations, including your ARES, that would survive the loss of commercial infrastructures that serve these areas. In addition to ICOM's line of amateur radio products, including D-Star digital, HF, and analog radios, ICOM now has their new IC-SAT-100 portable push-to-talk satellite communicators and the IP501H and M LTE radios to offer very wide area communications for those state and region-wide emergencies. ICOM's IC-SAT-100 is the perfect handheld satellite radio for use outside of cellular or push-to-talk network range. By operating on Iridium's constellation of satellites, the IC-SAT-100 can quickly and easily connect with other push-to-talk devices from virtually anywhere. Mobile versions are also available. The IC-SAT-100 includes an emergency call button, the AquaQuake feature, which is an IP67 waterproof rating, and a vibrating function that keeps water out of the speaker. It has AES 256-bit encryption and a voice recording function. The IP501H and the IP501M radios provide instant wide area coverage over LTE. By using an LTE network, you bypass the need for pre-existing push-to-talk infrastructure, allowing nationwide coverage without the added cost of building and maintaining your own repeater network. A mobile version is available. These radios include priority interrupt calling, individual, group, talk group, multiplex, talk group, and all calls, emergency button, lone worker feature, and man-down functions, vibration alert notifications. Connect to all of these devices and more, even systems operating on different protocols, with the VE-PG4 ROIP or Radio over Internet Protocol Gateway. From land mobile and LTE radios to IP communication terminals and IP phone systems, they all work together to form one seamless and uninterrupted network, ensuring your emergency comms are received and forwarded. The VE-PG4 is your bridge connection between radio systems, an LTE transceiver gateway, an IP phone interconnect, a multi-site connection between other VE-PG4s, external equipment connection. ICOM's VE-PG4 solves all of your interoperability needs. Emergency communications groups and amateurs that serve them have complex communications needs, often beyond what amateur radio alone can solve. ICOM has the solutions to bridge any disaster situation to keep emergency personnel in touch. To learn more about these essential communication products from ICOM, click on the link in this week's show notes pages. And now back to our QSO Today. Well, after you left Hughes Aircraft Company, what did you do after that?
I went into Northrop into a laser lab. Both labs, Hughes and Northrop, were R&D programs. A lot of fun, great people to work with, and a lot of freedom to try things, experiment things, and use your ideas and build stuff to try and help solve problems, and extremely rewarding, when you got things going. And the people I work for are really super. Excuse the explosions in the back. Tomorrow's the 4th of July, so people are anxious.
They're ready.
They're ready.
Well, I think California has been locked down from COVID for the last year or so, hasn't it? People are probably very anxious to get out and do their...
Yeah. Well, we're mask free now, so I don't wear one anymore. I've been vaccinated. And anyway, it's a lot of fun running 6-meter DXing. They hang around with a bunch of guys that are pretty serious about it as well, working countries, and it's fun. It's a challenge. It's not easy to do. It's probably the hardest band there is to do DXCC on. It takes quite a few years to do it. Summertime's the prime time right now because the band population the last few years is extremely high on 6 meters, the highest in history. And there's more worldwide stuff going on now on 6 meters than ever before.
And why do you think that is?
Because all the radios have 6 meters, and there's some good antennas available, and people are bored with other things, and the challenge of 6 meters is kind of spread, so people do it. And the FT8 makes it a little bit easier to work super weak stuff. So twofold thing. And previously, 10 years ago, nobody heard about FT8 or computers or let alone long-haul sporadic key to Europe, especially in the summer. All we had was every 10 or 11 years with a sunspot cycle, about 2 or 3 years worth of high levels of ionization, the F2 propagation. So usually in March, April, October, November, for about 3 years, we'd have worldwide 6-meter F2. We thought that was all there was. And during the summer, there was nothing except maybe working the states. We get tired of working all states. And then FT8 came about, band population went way up. Europe acquired 6 meters, and the rest is history. It's an absolute madhouse at times with the number of people that are on. This evening, we had 2 more openings to Japan, little quick short ones. And yeah, we worked probably 1,000 Japanese stations over the years, but we're still looking for new ones like Formosa. China and Hong Kong are pretty common. Korea, the Philippines. We've even worked into Vietnam and some long-haul stuff that we never dreamed possible to do on 6 meters, especially into Europe and Southeast Asia. It's really exciting.
In your love of building, that you actually built a company called Angle Linear. When did you start Angle Linear, and how did that go? Well,
let's see. After early 70s, I got into Oscar because I worked with a guy. It's called at the time the WA3 Fox Victor Germany Portable 6. Really smart guy. He got me into Oscar 6 satellite stuff, and I loved it. So I started fooling around with that, Oscar 6 and 7. CW, mostly on the satellite. That was a lot of fun, challenging. And then in 1973, on 2 meters, on 220, a guy working Hawaii or trying to work Hawaii on 220. And that got my curiosity going. And so I got on 2 meters. I built a transverter vacuum tube, got on 2 meter sideband, and I've been there ever since 73. And pretty much built radios on all the bands all the way up to 24 gigahertz. I mean, you name it, every one of them, 6 meters and up, all homebrew, and had a lot of fun doing it in all the years. A lot of fun. So I started building preamplifiers, and I thought, you can't really buy these things. I wasn't very wealthy anyway, so I had to start building stuff again. So I started getting into building preamplifiers, and then we came across this device called a U310. I still build U310s to this day because it's a great little transistor. It's one of the ones that's kind of helped the VHF amateur community get going, along with the 2N4416 FET. But the U310 FET is one of the real forerunners of modern FETs, I think. So I started building preamps, and then a couple of people said, well, why don't you build one for me? So I sold my first couple preamps in 1976 to amateurs, and a few commercial guys got into them, and sales started going by word of mouth, and bigger and bigger and bigger. And oh boy, quite a few years later, I switched over to, I started working full-time at home in 1990. So for the past 28 years, I was full-time at home under a company, Angle Linear. So I started in 76. And a few years later, I don't know, probably mid-80s or something like that, I slowly transitioned into putting more and more time into it, developing more preamps. In the early 80s, the first gas FETs came out, and I immediately built a 1296. It was actually pretty good for the day, a little under 0.4 noise figure. A lot of people today are hard-pressed to get that, even today. So the gas FETs were a miraculous transistor compared to the bipolars. I remember my first 432 bipolar at Fujitsu. It cost me $50 and I blew it up with a bad noise figure meter head. So that was a lot of money back then. So I started building more and more amplifiers. They got bigger and bigger and commercially, and I started developing more products. And over a period of years, it just grew and grew to the point where I guess my peak was in one 14-month period. I built over 1,000 amplifiers, so I was pretty busy.
Well, up until this week, I didn't even know about your company, frankly, and I've been involved in UHF repeaters and stuff like that for almost 50 years. But you also built duplexers and cavities and things like that, and that's kind of where, when you were talking earlier about, being meticulous up in the microwave frequencies, you have to be meticulous. How did those products come into the Angle Linear line?
Well, there's some basic things about a low-noise preamplifier. It's broader than a barn door. And when you live in the city, there's 2 billion transmitters all running, and if you put a low-noise preamplifier on your antenna, you're going to get news, weather, and sports, whether you want it or not. So I started learning about what's mislabeled as a cavity filter. It's actually a quarter-wave resonator, a big piece of coax, a quarter-wave long, and you couple in and out of it, and that becomes a filter, which you can tune. So I started developing filters for myself, learning about them, not really using any mathematics, empirical, and pretty good at empirical design of things. Even my cavity amplifier was done that way for 1200 with great success. So I started building quarter wave resonator filters and learning how to make 2 and 3 and 4 of them. And I got some software, built some comb line bandpass filters, which is a big pile of resonators without having cables connecting them together. So the performance is better and the loss is better. And learned about it. I got a couple of spectrum analyzers. I saved up and bought some old Hewlett-Packard test equipment and swept return loss bridge and things like that, basic things to build RF stuff, along with spectrum analyzers for building local oscillator chains and things of this nature. And always learning, always trying to do better. So we started building filters along with preamps, and those were extremely successful because people could put a preamp on a repeater and not get clobbered. And I built a lot of those dual bandpass cavities with a PHEMT preamplifier on a rack panel, extremely successful, commercial, amateur, everything. And then we got into doing the duplexers, starting with amateur radio, and then I got into doing it for NASA and commercial entities here locally up in the 460, 470 meg region. The NASA ones were high-power VHF for the United States government provided communications for the Russian space station. And there's 4 frequencies roughly in the 130, 120, 30, 40 region that Mir used medium bandwidth FM on. So we provided communications from 3 locations in the U.S. for them. They paid us, but we were provided access to Mir, and we would send them the audio. But they kept having problems, so I listened to it one day. I got to working with a real nice fellow out at Dryden Flight Research Center in Edwards Air Force Base. He says, "What do you think the problem is?" So I told him exactly what it was. So I ordered some crystal filters for the first IF, actually ceramic filters of a radio that he sent me, and it solved their problem big time by widening the IF. Their deviation was like 12 kilohertz instead of the normal 5. So they were over deviating, and the Russians in their space station had no provisions for deviation limiting, and they were just getting extremely distorted. So we solved that problem, modified a pile of radios, and I built lots of filters and stuff for NASA out at Dryden and New Mexico and Wallops Island and duplexers, which enabled them to hear the space shuttle and International Space Station and Mir quite well, even several thousand miles away without interference. Once again, going back to basics, running good bandpass filtering, a good preamp, everything stable, everything 50 ohms, no oscillating, and totally predictable performance. So it's very successful, and all of them are still running.
Let me take a quick break to tell you about my favorite amateur radio audio podcast, and that's the Ham Radio Workbench podcast with George, KJ6VU, Jeremy, KF7IJZ, and it now includes Michael Walker, VA3MW, where they pursue topics, technology, and projects on their ham radio workbenches every 2 weeks. The group documents their projects and makes circuit boards available to their listeners. They have interesting guests and go in deep. Jeremy may complain about the overall length of the podcast, but friends, let me tell you that I could listen to it all day, and that's good. Even if you are a seasoned ham radio builder or just getting started, be sure to join George, Jeremy, and Mike now for the Ham Radio Workbench podcast on every podcast player. Use the link on this week's show notes page by clicking on the image. A new way to show your support of the QSO Today podcast is to buy me a coffee. I consume gallons of coffee to create this weekly podcast. Invite me for coffee by pushing the yellow button, Buy Me a Coffee, on the QSO Today show notes page. And now back to our QSO Today. What is the most notable application of an angle linear product to date?
Oh boy. I did a lot of them. Built them for MRI machines. MRIs like super low noise figures for sensitivity that we all use. I built preamps for a JPL for Mars when they were looking for stuff. They dunk them in.
I think that's where I was going. I think I was trying to lead you to JPL.
Yeah, it was kind of fun because of my reputation. I mean, I used to have people call me up. It's actually kind of funny. They knew I would crank out stuff quick. They wanted some 437 megahertz. That's the frequency. 403 and 437 approximately are the Mars frequencies. And that's what they still use today. The rovers communicate with the orbiters on those frequencies. Full duplex, 403, 437. They do it very well, low power. And then the orbiters send the info back at high data rate back to Earth. I built preamps for 437 so they could put them on, I think, a Stanford dish and look for a spacecraft that went missing. And what they did was they cooled these silly things down to 5 and 14 kelvins, extremely cold. So that was kind of a fun project. I used to have people call me up and say, we're having a problem here. What do you think? So what I do is I'd say, well, it sounds like you need some filtering. So I've actually had a call one morning, and by the next morning I had the filter sitting on the porch for the guy to pick up on his way out to work to do flight testing with it because, hopefully you're getting rid of interference. So I had really fast deliveries on custom products for people, which was kind of a fun thing, being able to solve quickie problems and things of that nature. The Mars JPL stuff was fun because it had a kind of an exciting use in the long run, and I knew how to make all this stuff for them. So,
do you have filters and preamps on Mars right now?
No, nothing on Mars. This was all ground station stuff here, so they could hear there.
Okay, so what's the current rig?
Oh, I run a K-line, a K3, not the S model, but a K3 with a 1,500-watt amplifier. I like the K3. Prior to the K3, I had all homebrew high-level transverters for 6 meters and 2 meters, all built, high-level mixing, and I switched over to the K3 because they actually had what I've been using all these years, high-level front end, I mean, very high dynamic range radio with good filtering and everything else. So I quit using my homebrew transverters in front of, I used to have it in a TS930 that was highly modified for low power use, IF. I went to a 1000D and then a Orion 2. And those were, I hardly used them on the HF at all. They were primarily as a 28 meg IF for all my VHF and microwave activity. Today I run my K3 on literally all bands to 10,000. It's one of the nice things about the box. I can push a button and go from 6 meters to 10,368 megahertz at the push of a button. My 10 gigahertz radio is direct conversion to 28 megahertz with all homebrew everything. I run about 10 watts at the moment. I have a 35 watt radio under construction that's going to go up on the tower. But the K3 is a gorgeous radio. I like the way it works.
You are a microwave operator and a contester. I think you're also a rover. Is that right?
Yeah, I used to do a lot of roving years ago, 6 meters through 24 gigahertz. I had a van, an old van that I used. I finally bought another one and had a rack in it full of radios and all kinds of stuff. And we went all over Southern California and out to Arizona, Nevada, Utah, down into Mexico, Baja, operating on all the microwave and VHF bands during VHF contests and microwave contests. Central Valley was a lot of fun. I enjoy going to Central Valley. It's the wide open spaces and kind of nice. You get out to see the rest of the world.
Is the allure of the Central Valley because I think what Fraser Peak is kind of like at the top of the Tehachapis there. So it sees both the Central Valley and Southern California?
Yeah, it works really well. Fraser's a good place. I have a 10 gigahertz beacon that I built for Fraser 23 years ago. It's been operating ever since. In fact, it's behind me right now on the bench. I upgraded it to be GPS locked in frequency. I had a problem and replacing 40-year-old circuit boards with 40-year-old circuit boards. And all the components were aging uniformly. So we finally got rid of all those and went to a GPS locked local oscillator. So that'll be back up on the hill here in probably next week or so. It's about 1 watt omnidirectional on Fraser. Been heard well over 800 miles away, all the way to Arizona, Nevada, Sacramento, deep in Mexico down the coast. So it's a extremely good beacon. Fraser's an excellent location. A lot of contesters go there during the microwave contest and during the VHF contest because of its height, and it's shot up the valley and from down here all the way to San Diego and into Mexico.
Now, did you have the first or do you have the only 10 gigahertz distance record?
No, I don't have, no. I've worked about 900 miles personally on 10 gigahertz. There's other people who've worked a little bit farther out here. That's a combination of knife edging from the Central Valley down south into coastal ducting deep into Mexico when a good friend WB6 Charlie Whiskey Nancy went down there with his 10 gigahertz equipment. One of the real disadvantages of being in the Southwest, there's nobody living to the west of us. It's all water. Whereas if you live in Texas or Oklahoma or Kansas, you can work people in all directions, and they get ducting during the summertime, and they can work some really good distances as well. And it takes, good equipment to do it, and you got to be ready. And so it's a trade-off. I've built a lot of equipment for Hawaii over the years, transverters for Paul, who's now a silent key, KH6HME. We got into work in Hawaii a long time ago, built 1296 radio and transverter and beacon for 1296 back in the early 80s. It's still running to this day, slightly modified. And we built the 2-meter beacon, which went in I think 1982 or 3, which is still running today. I recently rebuilt it to be in whisper mode, WSPR. So I've been extremely active in building up all the equipment for Hawaii all these years. I didn't build a 220. 2 meters, 902, 1296, 2304, 3456, and 5760, and 10,000. And we managed to work Hawaii on all bands to 5760, except we'd never made it on 10 gigahertz with Paul. We're actively building digital stuff so that when VK7MO goes over there next year, we can hopefully work him on 10,000. Very knowledgeable fellow.
Will you fly to Hawaii to put this stuff in, or do you just mail it over as a package and there's somebody that puts it in? And where in Hawaii is this equipment located?
It's up on the Mauna Loa volcano. And I had friends who were airline pilots who would smuggle it over there for me for free.
That's convenient.
Yeah, today it'd cost you a fortune to do it.
I'm wondering whether I know who some of those airline pilots are. They used to be quite active amateurs on the air.
Oh, yeah, Delta Airlines freighter pilots.
I remember that they could pull one of these big luggage carriers that would go into the bottom of you could throw all your equipment in it and send it around. Okay, so it's on the side of the Mauna Loa active volcano, I think, right?
Yes.
And so what's the case for beacons? I mean, they're broadcasting all of the time. You don't hear them all the time, but you hear them at various times. Like I think the ducting to California from Hawaii is during the summer. Like it starts now and goes through September?
Pretty much. You can't predict it. Conditions these days are nothing like what they used to be 20 years ago. 20, 25 years ago, there were some incredible openings that would last for, I remember one, 432 was S9 for over 9 days straight. S9, just pounding in. You could work it with a milliwatt, right? Today, it's pretty sparse. You get openings like that. We just had our first Hawaiian opening that I got this year, 3 or 4 or 5 days ago, something like that. But since it's now a whisper mode beacon, WSPR, weak signal propagation reporter, I rebuilt it so that it puts out about 40 watts of whisper mode, GPS locked, incredible mode. Digital beacons are the cat's meow, let me tell you. So I'm slightly blocked to Hawaii by Palos Verdes, so I run a 9-element Yagi up at 85 feet with a low-loss feed line, and it works pretty well. And I was able to decode Hawaii really well for several hours a few days ago, along with everybody else, and then it's gone. You never know exactly when it's going to open. The Hepburn propagation prediction page is pretty good on showing what openings are going to be and things of that nature, although I tend to not use them that much. But yeah, it's primarily summer. You can get some rare winter openings. It just depends upon weather fronts sweeping down from Alaska and having propagation run across the leading edge of it as it goes by. That's kind of rare, but it happens, like opening in the middle of November for an hour and then it's gone.
Now, it seems to me that, and maybe this is new, WhisperNet beacons on microwave seem to be unusual. Is there a large number now of receiving stations on Whisper where you could go to the website and you could actually see when these openings are happening and where they're going?
Yeah, but it's not on microwave. They're mostly 2 meters. There's some 6-meter Whisper stuff. The Australians are really big on 2-meter Whisper. They have shortwave listener Whisper receiving contests, which is kind of a fun thing to do. We're not that big on it here on the West Coast. And they don't get anywhere near the kind of distances we get with our Hawaiian stuff. But it can't handle any kind of frequency drift or Doppler or anything like that, Whisper. So it's not a good microwave mode. Whereas Q65, the latest digital mode out of the super smart guys, K1JT and company, is ideal for microwave. In fact, I'm currently building some new 10 gigahertz digital beacons, the first of which will go up on Palos Verdes. It'll be internet controlled with WSJTX software being essentially internet controlled remotely and converted up to 10,368/300. And we'll be able to control the mode and things of that nature and experiment. And when they come up with new revisions to the digital modes, we can upload them and experiment. So it'll be the first digital beacon locally. And Q65 can handle some Doppler, like airplane scatter, to a limit. and things of that nature. So I'm literally right in the middle of building that as we speak. I've just finished running a bunch of tests here the other day, and it's looking really good, very promising. So,
What kind of omnidirectional antenna would you use on a 10 gigahertz beacon?
well, a vertical slot is equivalent to a horizontal dipole. So you have a piece of waveguide with a vertical slot in it that's a half wavelength tall, and you have a whole bunch of them on the side of a waveguide in the vertical row, offset slightly from center, and you can stack a bunch of dipoles together and get gain. And then you put wings on it, which more or less makes it like a big flat plate with these slots, vertical slots on the side, and becomes an omnidirectional, horizontally polarized antenna. Most line of sight propagation, you want to stay in the same polarization. When you scatter, you're going to get rotation of the polarization, but when you're line of sight to something and all, generally you're going to want to stay in the same. So we went with horizontal, just like all VHF bands are horizontally polarized. And the ones we currently use are 24 slots. They were published in the microwave update by a couple guys from Texas in the early 80s, and they still work like gangbusters. So they're pretty easy to make on a mill. I have a nice mill where I can build things, a lot of nice metalworking tools here at home. So they work very well.
That was going to be one of my questions, because it appears to me, you're very prolific in microwave equipment, and I can see it when you go to your website. There's lots and lots of microwave projects, but it appears you have to be almost a precision machinist to be in amateur radio microwave, or at least you need to know somebody. Is that the case? And if you're kind of a newbie to microwave, is there support for being a newbie in microwave?
Yeah, there's lots of support for new people into it. There's an enormous amount of equipment available today, which is really pretty neat. I mean, there's a lot of people making some pretty nice stuff. I like making stuff myself. I don't make everything, but I do enjoy building things and experimenting. So there's a lot of groups out, a lot of incredibly good web pages and discussion places, and a lot of publications like Dubus, D-U-B-U-S, is the foremost microwave publication book on the planet. It's been around since the mid-'80s, and it's kind of a German acronym for build-it-yourself microwave enhanced propagation stuff, something like that. Kind of a strange name, but it's for builders, and a lot of things are published there. I'm actually going to publish my microwave beacon stuff in there. I hadn't written any articles for there before, so it's kind of a nice place to just show what I did.
So you do have a fancy machine shop, though, right? And that's part of a result of Angle Linear?
Yeah, actually, in my quest to learn about building, I used to hang around the machine shop wherever I worked, and because I'd be making things for work. And the smartest people on the planet are people who've been a machinist for 40 years. They know how to do it. So I watched, asked a lot of questions, learned, tried things, built things myself, and I finally ended up buying a mill at home. A nice, unfortunately, it's an import, but I had a Bridgeport for quite a few years, and I do a lot of work on the mill, machining out boxes, making filters, things of that nature. It's amazing what you can make when you have a mill, quite honestly, whether it's wooden airplanes for the grandkids or metal preamp boxes.
A mill is like a drill press on an XY axis?
Yeah, it's a 54-inch table you can move up, down, left, right, in and out controllably, and nice little steps.
So the table moves, not the head?
Right. The table has a tool in it which spins extremely sharp. Extremely. You change the size of it and the speed of it, and you drive it into, to give you an idea what a mill does, I can take a block of aluminum and hollow it out and make it look like a box. That's what a mill does.
And where does one find a block of aluminum?
Oh, we have actually a pretty good metal store called M&K Metals in the western part of L.A. I've been buying stuff from them for, I don't know, at least 40 years, something of that nature. And they got pretty good stock of most metal. Obviously, prices are going up, but I buy what I need and don't throw anything away. You have to be useful, save scraps that are big and things of that nature. So I've been pretty much doing that my whole life, saving things and making things out of them.
Now, do you have a smelting oven or something like that so you can take all the scraps and throw them in there and make another block?
Oh, no.
Does anybody do that? I remember my junior high school we used to take aluminum cans and melt them down into aluminum so we could use it for projects. I was just wondering if anybody did that anymore.
I don't think so. That would be interesting. Maintaining the quality of the aluminum is probably pretty hard to do when you do that because there's so many different types of aluminum depending on what you're doing, whether you're going to weld it or drill and tap it or bend it. They're all different kinds of aluminums for those applications.
Do you make your own waveguide?
No. You can find surplus WR90 for X-band for 10 gigahertz. I've bought it, on eBay, and like a school will be dumping part of it. I'll get it through friends, things of that nature. A lot of pullouts off of mountaintops, things like that. And you don't throw any of that away. And make a lot of filters out of the waveguide. Works out really nice.
Now, if you're a new guy that hasn't purchased waveguide before, do you have to worry about dents, cracks, anything like that in waveguide? And if you're buying it on eBay, how do you protect yourself?
Well, look at the selling record of whoever sells whatever on eBay. If the guy's got a horrible rating, just stay away from him. People should have extremely good ratings on eBay on anything. Generally, you're going to find hams selling stuff. Dented waveguide, that's how they tune waveguide is with a hammer. They can pound on the waveguide and put little dents in it to tune it. You really don't want that. And you can straighten it out with a mandrel by driving something through the waveguide if it's not too long. But generally, and it won't crack, it's usually kind of a bronze copper, pretty hard copper type generally. So it's not easy to dent. It's easy to work with hand tools. All the original stuff I made was all hand tools long before I ever got my mill. You can do a lot with a drill press and a lot of files. It's a good way to go.
Let's change gears for a second. You've built a number of repeaters that you use in Los Angeles, and one of the ones that you write about is a repeater that you built on 1283 megahertz that's located on Mount Wilson. Mount Wilson tends to be at least the original mountain with all of the TV and FM radio transmitters, and it's very prominent in Los Angeles and covers most of the LA basin. What kind of coverage and performance does your repeater have compared to maybe UHF from the same site?
It's actually pretty good. We're kind of lucky here in Southern California because of the mountaintops. Mount Wilson's about a mile high, so you're pretty well line of sight for a long distance. I forgot what the number is, but 50, 60 miles easily. There's a formula for figuring out how far you can go on the curvature of the Earth based on height. But I quite easily work in San Diego, 100 miles away. Generally, you're going to say it's going to be line of sight for any repeater. To get dependable knife edge or ducting is pretty rare on a repeater, so it's going to be line of sight. In the middle of the country, you get 25 miles out of a 2-meter repeater if you're lucky, even when you're up on a tower. But out here, because we can get several thousand feet in the air, repeater coverage is phenomenal. Cactus, they got them all over the place, that intertie network. So you can do quite well there. 1200 is a great band. The FAA kind of screwed amateur radio by throwing them out and making everybody move when they put their one of their radar receivers up there here a few years ago. So everybody had to move frequency. But it's still surviving well. It was one of the highest concentration areas for 1200 repeaters in the country right here. A lot of them are quite successful. I'm in the process of modifying mine for a remote base for 24 gigahertz, beacon and transverter on 24 gigahertz tied to my 1200 repeater. That's down the road project.
What do you use for a receiver and exciter in your repeater?
What I've done there is I've taken a couple of surplus Motorola FM radios, VHF, totally bypassed the 40-watt amplifiers in them, got it to the point where they only transmit a milliwatt or so. The receivers are fine. You can, Robin, the guy that runs Cactus, WH6 Charlie Delta Radio, graciously programmed them for me. He knows all that stuff. So we're all set for variable frequency IF on receive and transmit, VHF, homebrew local oscillator and complete filters and everything else to get up to 1200. Homebrew pair of Mitsubishi power modules, about 28 watts, all homebrew. The only thing I didn't make was the IF radios. Everything else is 100% homebrew. Works great. Lots and lots and lots of filtering, zero interference.
So you're using Motorola VHF radios for the IF radios, and then you built transverters and converters to bring it up and down.
Yes, crystal control, local oscillator chain, and they work well. Same LOs I've used in 900, 1200, 2300, things like that all the way up.
So, Chip, is there mobile equipment on 1200 megahertz, or is this more of a base station to base station kind of intercom?
Well, Kenwood used to make mobiles. I haven't looked in quite a few years, actually. I think I just bought a 9700 ICOM, yeah, and I think it has FM in it, so that would be a base station type FM. I may ultimately try that. I don't know. But there was a lot of mobiles available from Kenwood, and I'm not sure if ICOM ever did or not, but they're kind of a commodity right now.
I think they might have had something like a one radio that did that, as I recall.
Yeah, there was a 531, 541, 1200 Kenwood or something. I've got a few of those that I use.
But they're rare. If you're trying to find them on eBay, you might have a hard time.
Yeah, and then the Kenwood Tri-Bander had 1200 modules available also. I have, I think, a couple of those. That works well.
Well, there's a lot of repeaters in Los Angeles that are mostly quiet, and I think maybe because there are just so many repeaters and there's not many operators that are using them. Does that seem to be the case on 1296 as well?
Well, it's pretty much true on all bands. 2 meters, 220 and 440 in the LA area, there's no frequencies available. They're all taken. You cannot get one. They're currently heavily used and doubled up, which is kind of silly, even the digital stuff. 1200, there's frequencies available. 900s, there's quite a few 900 repeaters, very high level. But the invention of the cell phone pretty well took a lot of the repeater activity away.
Right, so people can actually have their private conversations on their cell phones while they're driving to work rather than on the radio.
Yeah.
I think as a kid in the 70s on VHF and UHF, that was maybe the golden age of mobile radio to and from work.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Given your background and experience in all facets of ham radio, where would you recommend a newcomer with a technician class license? Where would you put them? Where would you recommend that they start?
Good question. Since there's so many aspects of amateur radio that can be fun, rewarding, educational, meet a lot of people, getting into a local club, which I didn't know about early on, I wish I had, and getting exposed to a lot of different things to find out what you really like. I was fortunate in that I got exposed to the microwave stuff, and I just took to it like crazy. But there's so many different aspects of it. The digital thing is one mode. You don't have to operate digital, but it's one mode. You can do stuff with it. Amateur television, there's low band DXing, CW, sideband, there's satellite, just enormous quantity of things you can get into an amateur radio. And if you get into a club, you can probably get exposed to quite a bit of it. I guess we're lucky today that we have the internet because you can more easily see all these things that people are doing. Moon bounce is growing like crazy because of the digital software. And then you pick up an extra 15 plus dB on your moon bounce path. And you can sit there and work moon bounce with a couple of small Yagis and 100 watts on 2 meters. Years ago, it took a kilowatt and 8 Yagis. Big, big difference. So a lot of people are getting into moon bounce, which is kind of fun. Satellites, I don't know that people are really doing that much anymore because satellites are so common. Repeaters are a nice tool to help do other things. There's people that love to do roving transmitter hunts. I don't know if they still do transmitter hunts or not, but different kind of groups. Roving with VHF radios is a lot of fun. Field day people, contesting. There's so many different aspects to amateur radio. It would be hard for a person to not find something they like.
But if you're a newbie, you wouldn't say you should go to 2-meter single sideband, for example, or something like that, just as a way to get your feet wet. If you're a guy that has no experience, I think sending someone to a club is probably the best idea. You don't have a specific recommendation in terms of where someone might go?
No, there's a lot of clubs, and I'm a member of the Southern Cal DX Club and the San Bernardino Microwave Society. The COVID virus thing has forced everybody into online meetings, which is pretty nice. So I think we're going to keep them up, to be honest. Driving 2.5 miles to a club meeting in the middle of the week and a couple hours back that's a lot of time, and the way gasoline prices are going. So online meetings are kind of neat. So you can join clubs and do online meetings, read about web pages, things of that nature. I would say generally for somebody just getting into it, like example, where I live in the city of Lomita, there used to be, 50 or 60 hams. I looked here about a year ago and there's like 170, and you go, where are they? And what they probably did was they all got technician class licenses and a 2-meter handheld, something like that for disaster communications, most likely, because you sure don't see many antennas up on houses.
I think this is probably true. This is kind of why I'm asking the question, because it seems to me that there's a whole lot of hams or a whole lot of people with ham radio licenses that are either not being served or underserved, or may not even know where to begin once they've, left the exam room and have no place to go.
Yeah, I think that's true. There are just so many different aspects to it. It's hard to pin it down. I mean, I have my likes and dislikes. I guess it's kind of like who you hang out with. If the people you like being around are CW nuts, you may be inclined to push to learn CW. So depending on the club you get in, could push you one way or another.
Your wife, Margaret, is N6CA, and she's also a ham. What kind of impact has amateur radio had on your family life?
Well, it's gotten in the way. You get involved like everybody else into these big projects, and I suppose it's like any other hobby. You can probably do it to excess. So looking back, it would have been better not to get into it so deeply at times, but it's a learning process on how to allocate your time and things of that nature. And I had a quest to try and accomplish things, and that probably got in the way somewhat.
Well, I think, on the other hand, for those of us that started as kids, it became a kind of a lifelong activity that also led to professional careers.
Oh, absolutely. It set me up for a professional career. I got my interest going, and it was something I really loved doing. And it got me into, lifelong career of learning and doing things. Very satisfying. Nothing real complicated, just all the basics and doing it correctly and trying to find solutions to problems, all basic stuff like preamplifiers and good filtering and good duplexers, and the success of all that has been, enormous. No rocket science, just good basics and common sense. It's no new inventions, just good old basics.
Well, you know what? I think, and I guess this could be a sociological study or maybe an episode for another day. And that is I think that maybe we're so used to, in the media and social media, of seeing amazing transformational technology events that people don't recognize the good basic design and improving on what you have and what you've just said is really, foundational and can be quite satisfactory in people's feeling like they have a sense of accomplishment. It doesn't have to be over the top every time to have a satisfying and happy life.
Oh, absolutely. There's not very many Einsteins in the world. Those are the kind of people that give the rest of us things to work with and make life better for us. I always think about basics. When we look at the end of World War II, there was the MIT RAD labs. think it was Radiation Labs or something. They put out a series of books that are to this day still totally applicable in all of the principles of radar and communications and antennas. There's nothing new today. The only thing about the digital is the signal processing capability of computers. Everything else is the same. Antennas, radio, sensitivity, filtering, power, antenna patterns. There's nothing different. And these guys came up with all that stuff back in the 40s. Amazing. The smart people back then that did all this stuff for us. It's impressive what these guys did that we're still benefiting from and actually enjoying amateur radio because of what they did, to be honest.
Chip, your generation of hams in Southern California were my mentors. You even mentioned Robin, who was also one of my mentors growing up in Southern California, who have this fantastic amount of radio experience around the basics. Do you see a generation coming up that actually will embrace this knowledge, maybe through the San Bernardino Microwave Society or something like that, to kind of take over for your generation when your generation moves on?
Unfortunately, no. Even in the commercial industry, there's an awful lot of people, like something as simple as bandpass filtering applications to make communication systems better. People that physically implement those kind of solutions to problems seem to be becoming more scarce every year. You have a generation, I think, of black box people where if something quits, you change the whole black box. You don't worry about what happened to it. And the only people that know what they're doing are the ones that are actually building the stuff in the factory. And we seem to be, unfortunately, sliding into a case of appliance operators where if something quits, you just throw it away and buy another one. And that's true in dishwashers, microwave ovens, and amateur radio, unfortunately. I have no problems ripping my K3 apart to modify it and or fix it or otherwise. Some people, they're absolutely shudder at the thought of taking the screw out of a radio. And I've modified so damn many radios in my lifetime, I can't count them anymore, I think. But it's a different mentality of doing things. Trying to find people to light that fire under is kind of hard. You'd have to be around somebody all the time. I think the days of builders is probably diminishing, unfortunately, in amateur radio. Computers have probably helped that a little bit, pushed it along. But you're going to find a lot of the VHF guys and the microwavers are some of the last real builders in amateur radio. You got to put things together. But then again, there's even so many companies producing stuff. You really don't have to be much of a builder anymore to get on 10 gigahertz. So it's all changing.
Well, I guess I start thinking maybe from a philosophical standpoint that as these skill sets go away and we become a black box society, that at a certain point, and maybe this is where science fiction comes in, you know, those of us who read science fiction, that there are many stories in science fiction where societies evolve to the point that they have no understanding of how things actually work. They just assume that it works until it stops working. I think I just watched a Star Trek Next Generation that had the same premise. Do you see that infrastructures in our society, in our country, that hold things together, that if those people disappear, those infrastructures could cease operation? Maybe that's too philosophical for this conversation, but I couldn't help but ask.
Yeah, I don't know. I was thinking of the same Star Trek episode, actually. This culture exists and they don't know why.
They can't have children because their technology allowed radiation from their sun to sterilize them. And they didn't know why that was happening because they didn't have anybody that could fix any of the technology that ran everything.
Yeah, we're kind of getting that way, actually. It's unfortunate. And maybe someday we'll have a miraculous discovery of somebody fixed their microwave oven. My son actually fixed his own microwave oven here a couple of years ago. Good for him.
Yeah, I think that's amazing. I actually have a 20-year-old washing machine, Maytag washing machine. I've decided that it's going to last another 20 years. I've learned how to fix it myself. And my wife says, "What are you doing? We can just call the repair guy." I said, "No." I said, "There's something about this that it's important to me that I keep this working. It's so simple." Why would we throw it away? So I'm waiting until I have to fix the transmission in the washing portion of it. That'll be my real test. But there is something about fixing things yourself, especially things that could work a lot longer than throwing it out and buying something new that is designed perhaps to only last 5 years.
Well, the good news is my son is like that. He likes fixing stuff, making things, saving money, and the thrill of fixing something. And I'm guessing that some of it rubbed off on his son. My grandson just turned 16, started driving last week. Anyway, but he's a builder. He loves building models and things of that nature, and he's fussy and fastidious about all of it. And I have no doubt that my son will influence him on fixing things and doing stuff. I just gave all my old toolbox for my car to my grandson because he's got his own car now. So hands-on is fun and rewarding.
I think Grandpa has a lot to say about that. If you interact with your grandson, I'm sure that he's learned a lot. What do you think the greatest challenge is facing amateur radio now?
Oh, boy. It's not population. There's so many hams. What, they got 600,000 hams in the U.S. now?
Almost 800,000.
That's a good question. I think hopefully some of those people will get the allure of DXing and VHF and microwave in them. I guess it depends upon who you hang out with. Challenge-wise, we've pretty much done just about everything you're going to do in the way of exciting DX. If you look at it quickly, working around the world, antennas are good, power is good, the digital software. I mean, you can work anywhere in the world. It's just, I put up a 80-meter, 60-meter sloper here, a year ago? 100 watts on 60 meters, you can work the world with FT8 on the low bands. You know, my first contact was, 4 Sugar 7 next to India, 100 watts on a wire. That's kind of cool. It's not really difficult. So a lot of the difficult things are not there anymore. The microwave stuff, pretty well, just about everything has been achieved. The moon bounce has really been mastered well. A lot of the communications modes and digital make things a lot easier. So I don't know that there's that many challenges left, or like there used to be when I first got into 2 meters. I mean, when I first got into 2 meters, working 100 miles was a big deal. And then working Arizona, that was even a bigger deal. Well, today it's like shooting fish in a barrel. So our standards have changed about what's tough and what's not. I'm not sure what people will look forward to doing. Maybe just experiencing it for themselves for the first time. Maybe saying, well, these people are doing this, I'd like to do the same thing. That would be one thing, I suppose. But as far as a tangible goal.
I think I've asked you an unfair question, Chip, because you're a guy that has probably taken on every amateur radio challenge at this point. So I think that for you, it seems like it's relatively easy now. But I find that in my experience with a lot of new hams, that something that we take for granted, like putting a UHF connector on the end of a piece of RG8, something that's easy for us that we've been doing for 50 years, is something that is literally quite out of the realm of possibility for a new ham that doesn't have a great mentor. Yeah.
Like I said, I wish I'd had a mentor when I first started. That would have been great. I learned a lot of things the hard way, but some of these clubs, they'll have, let's sit down and make a piece of coax night or something like that where they can learn and go, well, why do I need a piece of coax? I can buy one on Amazon.
Right. It's not until you try to pull it through your wall and up the side of your house that you realize that it would sure be nice to know how to cut that coax and put that connector on it.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I've made thousands of coax cables in my long career, mostly commercial stuff. Crimp connectors are phenomenal. They're so much better than the old-fashioned way. It's amazing, mechanically.
I'm going to take that down because I think I haven't been using crimp connectors. I've been using compression fit connectors that I'm buying to try those out. I'm not sure that I'm satisfied yet.
Well, soldering the center pins is a biggie, and crimping the braid is a biggie. And the other thing is shrink sleeving with the glue on the inside to hold the coax jacket better onto the connector, because the braid on a lot of the newer stuff is so sparse, depending on the coax you buy for amateur stuff. So,
Right, there's a braid, but then there's the foil, the aluminum foil that seems to be going around the center conductor.
yeah, and one of the problems with the foil and the braid is they're two dissimilar metals. They get any moisture at all, and you're talking noisy stuff, so you never use those on mountaintops at all, ever.
I learned that from the Southern California mentors. You only put hardline on the mountains.
There's some groups called repeater builders, which are pretty neat. There's some on the East Coast that have been around for a very long time, where you get a lot of tutorials on just those kind of things. There's an amazing, very few people are actually building repeaters anymore because you can buy the silly things. I actually got into building a repeater because I wanted to learn about it. So I bought an ICOM, one of the original 1200 repeaters, measured the heck out of everything, and then sold all the pieces after learning what they didn't do. And I wasn't real impressed and decided that the only way I'm going to make a satisfactory repeater is to build it myself. So it worked out well. And I learned a lot.
Do you have advice for newer returning hams to the hobby?
Have fun. There's a lot of places to have fun, a lot of really nice people to meet, and different aspects of the hobby that have grown big time in some ways that may not have been around when you were in it back in the day. CW sideband was all that there was. Very few people did anything else. And today it's all digital, but there's a lot of other things you can do. There's still a big herd of CW people running around, which is kind of nice. CW is extremely rewarding, very relaxing, and I'm actually getting better at it. The more I use it and the older I get, the better I'm getting at it. So that's kind of fun.
Well, I think I agree with you there. I just finished my CW Academy basic course, and I'm looking forward to the next step. I'm enjoying learning CW again after all these years.
Yeah, the receiving part's easy. I can't send comfortably faster than about 24. I can copy around 30, roughly. Robin CDR, he can, 40? He's a screamer. There's a few people that are just hot shots on CW. I know one guy that has copied 80 words a minute in his head at a ARRL contest. The guy's really good.
I could understand the head copy, but I have the same problem that you're having with the sending, is that it seems to me, even with a bug, to send more than 20, 25 is really quite difficult. So you think that someone sending 40 might be using a keyboard?
I don't know. I'm kind of disappointed there's people actually using a keyboard to send CW, to be honest. But for contests, yeah, keyboards are great. I never use a keyboard to send. I use a set of paddles. I never use the memory part of the keyer in the K3. Why should I? I never have, actually. I just use a set of paddles, and that's physically all I really get comfortable with. 24, 25 is a nice speed. Faster than that, it's a lot of work.
Chip, I want to thank you so much for joining me on the QSO Today podcast. This has been really fun. Because you're in Southern California, it kind of takes me a little bit down memory lane, which I like to visit every once in a while. So with that, I want to thank you so much and wish you 73.
Okay. Thanks for the invite and enjoyed talking with you very much. Thank you.
That concludes this episode of QSO Today. I hope that you enjoyed this QSO with Chip. Please be sure to check out the show notes that include links and information about the topics that we discussed. Go to www.qsotoday.com and put in N6CA in the search box at the top of the page. Be sure to click on the Expo menu item at the top of the page and in the show notes page for updates on the upcoming QSO Today Virtual Ham Expo. I'm updating this as I have more information. My thanks to ICOM America for its support of the QSO Today podcast. Please show your support of ICOM America by clicking on their banner in the show notes pages. You may notice that some of the episodes are transcribed into written text. If you'd like to sponsor this or any other episode into written text, please contact me. Support the QSO Today podcast by first joining the QSO Today email list by pressing the subscribe buttons on the show notes pages. I will not spam you or share your email address with anyone. Become a listener sponsor monthly or annually by clicking on the sponsor buttons on the show notes pages, or use my Amazon link before shopping at Amazon. Amazon gives me a small commission on your purchases while at the same time protecting your privacy. I'm grateful for any way that you show appreciation and support. It makes a big difference as I head towards episode 400. QSO Today is now available in the iHeart Radio, Spotify, YouTube, and a bunch of other online audio services, including the iTunes Store. Look on the right side of the show notes pages for a listing of these services. You can use the Amazon Echo and say, "Alicia, play the QSO Today podcast from TuneIn." My thanks to Ben Bresky, who edits every single show and allows both this host and my guest to sound brilliant. Thanks, Ben. Until next time, this is Eric, 4Z1UG, 73. The QSO Today podcast is a product of KEG Media Inc., who is solely responsible for its content.